The city thrummed with a late-night energy that seemed to pulse through the very walls of the penthouse, its rhythm matching the erratic beat of Lila's heart as she fumbled with the door handle. The night had been a whirlwind of laughter and cocktails, a heady mix that left her senses delightfully scrambled and her coordination decidedly compromised. As she stumbled over the threshold, the coolness of the marble floor beneath her feet served as a stark contrast to the warmth that enveloped her elsewhere, a warmth that was more than just the summer air clinging to her skin. Her crimson dress, a daring choice that now seemed both brazen and utterly appropriate, adhered to her like a second skin, its sheer fabric a testament to the evening's escapades. The humidity of the city had caused it to cling, outlining the curves and contours of her body with unapologetic precision. It was a garment that made no secret of its intentions, much like the woman who wore it. The digital display of the clock, perched on the mantelpiece like an unsleeping sentinel, glowed with the audacity of 2 a.m., its harsh red numbers blurred before her eyes, an accusation of her lateness that she was in no condition to refute. The world outside continued its nocturnal symphony, indifferent to her disorientation. It was then that Jordan materialized from the shadows, a silent specter in the semi-darkness of the penthouse foyer. His presence was as unexpected as it was reassuring, his steps quick and sure as he moved to intercept her before she could reach the staircase. Lila's breath hitched in her throat as she found herself enveloped in his embrace, his arms wrapping around her with a familiarity that bordered on the intimate. Jordan's hands, strong and steady, settled at her waist, their heat branding her through the flimsy material of her dress. The contact was electric, a jolt that seemed to travel straight to her core, igniting a warmth that had nothing to do with the summer night or the alcohol in her system. His touch was both a lifeline and an exploration, his fingers tracing the lines of her body as he guided her away from the potential hazard of the stairs. In her inebriated state, Lila was acutely aware of the way her dress rode up as Jordan maneuvered her towards the sanctuary of her room. The action revealed a tantalizing expanse of thigh, the lace edge of her undergarments peeking out as if playing a game of hide-and-seek with the moonlight that streamed through the nearby window. She offered a token protest, a slurred objection that died on her lips as his grip tightened ever so slightly, silently communicating his determination to see her safely to bed. The journey to her room was a blur of sensations, the softness of the plush carpet underfoot, the solidness of Jordan's chest against her back, the subtle scent of his cologne mingling with the scent of the night that clung to them both. As they reached the bed, Lila's knees gave way, and she sank onto the edge of the mattress, her eyelids heavy with the weight of her exhaustion. Jordan knelt before her, his movements fluid and deliberate. He took her foot in his hand, his fingers working the straps of her high heels with a deftness that spoke of a knowledge he should not possess. The touch of his knuckles against her calf was fleeting, yet it left a trail of awareness that seemed to buzz beneath her skin. She watched him through half-lidded eyes, her mind a haze of confusion and curiosity as he carefully removed her shoes, setting them aside with a tenderness that seemed at odds with the situation. As he prepared to leave, Lila reached out, her hand grasping his wrist in an attempt to anchor herself in the moment. "Stay," she murmured, the word a whisper that seemed to hang in the air between them. Jordan hesitated, his gaze locked with hers, the conflict within him as clear as the moonlight that bathed the room. For a moment, Lila thought he might concede, might give in to the tension that crackled in the space that separated them, but then he pulled away, his hand slipping from her grasp as he rose to his feet. "You should rest," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through her. Lila watched him retreat, her heart pounding in her chest as she allowed herself to fall back onto the bed. The cool silk of the sheets was a stark contrast to the warmth that Jordan's touch had left behind. As she wrapped herself in the bedding, her dress twisting around her waist, she couldn't help but feel a twinge of disappointment mingled with the remnants of her intoxication. In the solitude of her room, with the city's distant hum as her only companion, Lila closed her eyes and surrendered to the pull of sleep. Dreams of shadowed corridors and tender touches awaited her, a realm where the lines between stepmother and stepson blurred into non-existence. And somewhere in the depths of her subconscious, she knew that the night's events had set into motion a chain reaction that would forever alter the dynamic between them. As consciousness returned to Lila, it did so with the reluctance of a tide receding from shore. The morning light, softened by the sheer curtains, cast a golden hue over the room, its warmth doing little to dispel the chill that lingered in the air. She stirred, her limbs heavy and her head throbbing with the remnants of last night's indulgences. The cool sheets against her bare skin were a revelation, a stark contrast to the heat that had enveloped her upon her return to the penthouse. Memories of the previous night began to coalesce, fragments of an evening that had started with the vibrancy of city lights and ended with the silent ministrations of Jordan's hands. She recalled the way he had undressed her, his touch a paradox of tenderness and tension, each brush of his fingers leaving a trail of goosebumps in its wake. The recollection sent a shiver down her spine, a mixture of gratitude for his help and a disquieting awareness of the boundaries that had been crossed. With a sigh, Lila extricated herself from the tangle of bedding and padded barefoot to the ensuite bathroom. The shower beckoned, its promise of hot water and solitude a siren call that she could not ignore. As she stepped beneath the spray, the water cascaded over her, a liquid symphony that danced across her skin and washed away the remnants of the night before. She closed her eyes, allowing the steam to envelop her, a misty cocoon that offered a momentary respite from the complexities of her situation. The droplets traced the contours of her body, from the curve of her shoulder to the swell of her hip, each one a gentle reprimand that reminded her of the intimacy that had unfolded in the darkness of her room. Her fit form, honed by discipline and a dedication to self-care, responded to the water's touch with a vitality that belied the previous night's excesses. As the water ran clear, devoid of the suds that had clung to her skin, Lila turned off the tap and reached for a plush towel. She dried herself with brisk efficiency, taking care to avoid the reflection that waited in the mirror. She was not yet ready to confront the woman who stared back at her, a woman whose actions had veered perilously close to the edge of propriety. Donning a silk robe that whispered against her skin, Lila left the sanctuary of the bathroom and made her way to the kitchen. The penthouse was quiet, its silence a stark contrast to the cacophony of her thoughts. The familiar ritual of preparing breakfast provided a welcome distraction, the mundane tasks of grinding coffee beans and slicing bread a balm for her tumultuous emotions. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, its rich, dark notes mingling with the comforting scent of warm toast. Lila moved with practiced ease, setting the table with care, each placement of cutlery and pour of orange juice a step towards the inevitable conversation that awaited her and Jordan. As she prepared poached eggs, her focus was on the delicate dance of timing and temperature, the whites firming up around the gently quivering yolks. The act of cooking was meditative, a temporary escape from the tension that coiled in her stomach. She plated the food with an artist's eye, the vibrant hues of avocado and cherry tomatoes a testament to her culinary skill. With breakfast arranged to her satisfaction, Lila allowed herself a moment to gather her thoughts. The aromatic swirl of coffee and the sight of the perfectly set table were reassuring, a reminder of the life she had built for herself within these walls. And yet, as she called out for Jordan to join her, the fragile illusion of normalcy threatened to shatter, exposing the raw undercurrent of emotions that simmered just beneath the surface. As Jordan entered the kitchen, the subtle shift in the atmosphere was palpable. His eyes met hers, a silent exchange that acknowledged the shift in their dynamics. They took their seats across from each other, the clink of cutlery against china a hollow echo in the otherwise silent room. The breakfast that Lila had prepared with such care now lay between them, a peace offering of sorts, a momentary truce in the aftermath of their shared transgression. Conversation was sparse, limited to the necessities of passing salt and pepper, of commenting on the quality of the meal. Lila watched Jordan from beneath her lashes, studying his reactions, searching for some indication of his thoughts. His demeanor was unreadable, his focus seemingly centered on the food before him. It was Lila who finally broke the silence, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. About last night, she began, setting her fork aside. We need to talk about what happened. Jordan looked up at her words, his expression guarded. I know, he replied, his tone matching hers in its evenness. But first, let's eat. We'll need our strength for the conversation that's coming. Lila nodded, acquiescing to the delay. She took a sip of her coffee, the bitter taste grounding her in the moment. As they continued their meal, the weight of the impending discussion hung heavy in the air, a silent reminder that the events of the previous night had irrevocably altered the landscape of their relationship. For now, they maintained the facade of normalcy, but both knew that the truth would demand to be addressed, and when it did, nothing would ever be the same again. The clink of cutlery against fine china was an arrhythmic percussion that filled the penthouse's dining area, a stark contrast to the heavy silence that loomed over Jordan and Lila. Each scrape of a chair leg against the hardwood floor seemed to echo the discomfort that lingered in the air, an unspoken tension that hung between them like a thick fog, obscuring familiar landmarks of their shared existence. Lila, seated across from Jordan, found herself fixated on the way his throat worked as he swallowed his food, the motion betraying a nervousness that he was otherwise careful to conceal. She knew that the time for avoidance had passed. The events of the previous night could not be swept away as easily as the crumbs that now littered their plates. With a resolve that belied the turmoil within her, Lila set her fork down, the sound unnaturally loud in the stillness of the room. Jordan, she began, her voice a carefully calibrated instrument designed to convey both casualness and a hint of provocation. I think it's time we addressed last night, don't you? Jordan's gaze flickered up to meet hers, a flicker of wariness passing over his features before he could mask it with a practiced neutrality. What's there to say? He replied, his tone nonchalant, but his fingers betraying him as they tightened around the handle of his coffee cup. Lila leaned back in her chair, her eyes never leaving his. I was reckless, she admitted freely. And you, well, you were my knight in shining armor, weren't you? Her lips curled into a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. But I can't help but wonder, did you enjoy the view? The question, once uttered, seemed to hang in the air like a challenge, a gauntlet thrown down between them. It was a loaded inquiry, one that danced along the edge of propriety and threatened to topple the precarious balance of their relationship. Jordan's cheeks flushed a deep crimson, the color clashing sharply with the dark stubble that shadowed his jawline. Lila, he stammered, his composure slipping. It's not like that. I was just trying to help. Lila shrugged, the motion deliberate in its nonchalance. Of course, she said, her voice laced with an undertone of skepticism. I'm not blind, Jordan. I know what I saw in your eyes last night. She paused, allowing her words to sink in, watching as he struggled to maintain his composure. The air between them was charged now, electric with the undercurrents of their shared secret. Jordan opened his mouth as if to offer a retort, but seemed to think better of it, clamping his lips shut and averting his gaze to the remnants of his breakfast instead. Lila, satisfied that she had made her point, stood from the table, her movements smooth and deliberate. Why don't we take some time to process this? She suggested, her tone softening slightly. We can revisit the conversation later, when we've both had a chance to clear our heads. Jordan nodded, his relief palpable. Yeah, maybe that's for the best, he agreed, his voice barely above a whisper. As Lila retreated to the solitude of her room, she could not help but feel a twinge of satisfaction at having unsettled Jordan. Yet, beneath the surface of her bravado, there lurked a kernel of uncertainty, a nagging question about the wisdom of dredging up the unspoken desires that had been laid bare the night before. Alone in her room, Lila allowed herself to consider the implications of her actions. She had willingly stirred the pot, intentionally provoking a reaction from Jordan, but to what end? Was it merely a means of asserting control over a situation that had spiraled beyond her grasp? Or was there a deeper, more insidious motivation at play? As she lay on her bed, staring up at the ceiling, Lila was forced to confront the uncomfortable truth. She was playing a dangerous game, one that could potentially unravel the fabric of their family and leave lasting scars in its wake. Yet, despite the inherent risks, she found herself inexorably drawn towards the precipice, tantalized by the thrill of the unknown and the allure of the forbidden. In the sanctuary of her room, Lila closed her eyes and surrendered to the tumult of her emotions, a maelstrom of desire, guilt, and a burgeoning sense of anticipation for what was yet to come. The day stretched out before her, an unwritten chapter that promised to test the boundaries of her relationship with Jordan in ways she had never imagined possible. The afternoon had waned into the early evening, its passage marked by the lengthening shadows that crept across the penthouse floor. Lila found solace in the ritual of preparing dinner, the methodical chopping of vegetables and the sizzle of meat in the pan serving as a temporary balm for her racing thoughts. The kitchen, with its gleaming appliances and the rich aromas that now permeated the air, was her domain, a place where she could exert control and structure, even as her personal life seemed to be unraveling at the seams. Jordan, ensconced at the kitchen island, watched her with a quiet intensity that was both unnerving and oddly reassuring. His presence was a constant in her life, a fixture that she had come to rely upon, even as the boundaries of their relationship had begun to blur. His silence, while not unusual, seemed more pronounced in the wake of their earlier conversation, a conspicuous fortress that Lila found herself both respecting and yearning to dismantle. "You've been quiet," she remarked, her voice slicing through the kitchen's quiet hum with surgical precision. The statement hung between them, an acknowledgement of the elephant in the room that neither had yet to address directly. Jordan's gaze lifted to meet hers, a flicker of something unreadable passing over his features. "Just thinking," he replied, his tone non-committal, yet the tightness around his eyes betrayed a degree of discomfort that he could not entirely conceal. Lila set down the knife she'd been using, her hands now free to gesticulate as she spoke. "We can't just pretend that last night was a figment of our imagination, Jordan," she said, her words deliberate and charged with an undercurrent of emotion. "Something happened, something that can't be undone. We need to talk about it, to understand what it means for us going forward." The air between them seemed to crackle with tension, the unspoken implications of her words hanging heavy in the air. Lila held Jordan's gaze, her expression resolute even as her heart thrummed with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. Turning away, she moved towards one of the kitchen drawers, her fingers deftly locating the object of her search. A bottle of gin, its amber liquid a beacon of liquid courage in the dimming light of the kitchen. She extracted 2 crystal tumblers from an overhead cabinet and set them on the counter with a decisive clink. "Perhaps a drink will loosen our tongues," she suggested, her voice laced with a hint of irony as she poured a generous measure into each glass. The sound of the gin pouring forth was akin to a waterfall in the silence of the kitchen, a cascade of potential that promised to either smooth the edges of their conversation or send it careening into uncharted territory. Jordan watched her, his expression inscrutable as she approached him, extending one of the tumblers in his direction. Their fingers brushed in the exchange, a fleeting contact that sent a jolt of awareness coursing through Lila's veins. She ignored the sensation, retreating to the relative safety of the opposite side of the kitchen island as she raised her own glass in a silent toast. The first sip of gin was a shock to the system, its crisp burn a stark reminder of the potency of the drink and of the conversation that lay ahead. Lila watched as Jordan took a sip from his own glass, the muscles in his throat working as he swallowed, his eyes never leaving hers. "You're right," he conceded after a moment, his voice a low rumble that seemed to resonate within the confines of the kitchen. "We can't pretend that everything is normal, but I don't know if alcohol is the answer, Lila." Lila shrugged, her fingers tracing the contours of the tumbler in her hand. "It's not about finding an answer, Jordan," she replied, her tone softening slightly. "It's about giving ourselves permission to be honest, with each other and with ourselves. Maybe the gin will help us get there." As they continued to sip their drinks in a silence that was now more companionable than strained, Lila could not help but feel a sense of accomplishment, She had broached the subject, had forced them both to acknowledge the shift in their relationship. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with potential pitfalls and emotional landmines, but at least they were moving forward together. The rest of the evening unfolded with a cautious camaraderie that belied the tension of their earlier interactions. They spoke of trivial matters, their conversation a delicate dance around the central issue that had brought them to this point. The dinner that Lila had prepared was consumed with a degree of normalcy that seemed almost surreal, given the circumstances. As the evening's shadows stretched across the penthouse, a subtle transformation took place within its walls. The gin that Lila had poured with such deliberation now coursed through their veins, a warm tide that loosened tongues and dissolved barriers with an ease that was both liberating and disconcerting. The atmosphere in the room shifted, becoming charged with an undercurrent of desire that was as intoxicating as the drinks they sipped. Jordan's gaze, previously so carefully averted, now drifted with increasing frequency over the contours of Lila's body. His eyes, a shade darker than usual, traced the lines of her figure with an intensity that was almost tangible, a silent acknowledgement of the attraction that simmered just beneath the surface of their interactions. Lila, fully aware of the effect she was having, reveled in the power of her femininity. The gin had infused her with a boldness that was both exhilarating and uncharacteristic, a fearless audacity that compelled her to push the boundaries of their relationship to its limits. She leaned forward to place her drink on the table, the motion causing her dress to gape open, revealing a tantalizing expanse of cleavage that drew Jordan's gaze like a moth to a flame. "Is something catching your interest, Jordan?" she teased, her voice a sultry whisper that seemed to wrap around him, drawing him inexorably into her web. She watched with a sense of satisfaction as a flush crept up his neck, the physical manifestation of his internal struggle for composure. As she leaned back in her chair, the fabric of her dress tightened across her chest, a deliberate provocation that left little to the imagination. Lila knew she was playing with fire, yet she found herself unable, or perhaps unwilling, to extinguish the flames that threatened to consume them both. The game of cat and mouse continued as Lila rose from her seat, her movements languid and deliberate. She made her way to the other side of the room, ostensibly to retrieve a fallen napkin, but the true purpose of her actions was written in the subtle sway of her hips, the deliberate parting of her legs as she bent down, affording Jordan an unobstructed view of the lace that hugged her curves. The tension in the room reached a fever pitch, a palpable pulse that thrummed in the air around them. The gin had done its work, stripping away layers of inhibition to reveal the raw, unvarnished truth of their desire for one another. And in that moment, as Lila straightened and turned to face Jordan, her eyes locked onto his, there was no turning back. With a boldness that belied the turmoil within her, Lila closed the distance between them, each step a silent declaration of her intent. Jordan's breath hitched in his throat as he watched her approach, his body tensing in anticipation of the storm that was about to break. When their lips finally met, it was a collision of wills, a melding of mouths that was as much a challenge as it was a surrender. The kiss was a potent mixture of sweetness and urgency, a crescendo of pent-up emotions that had been building since the previous night. It was a kiss that spoke of unspoken longings and forbidden desires, a testament to the magnetic pull that existed between them, despite the rational arguments that whispered of caution and restraint. Lila's fingers threaded through Jordan's hair, pulling him closer, deepening the kiss in a silent demand for more. Jordan's hands, which had remained at his sides throughout the evening, now found their way to her waist, gripping her with a possessiveness that left no room for doubt regarding his feelings. The world outside the penthouse ceased to exist, its demands and expectations fading into insignificance in the face of the passion that now consumed Lila and Jordan. Their kiss was a bridge that spanned the chasm of their shared dilemma, a daring traverse. The kiss, which had begun as a tentative exploration, quickly morphed into a desperate assertion of need. It was as though a dam had burst within them both, releasing a torrent of emotions that had been building since the previous night. the taste of gin on their tongues was a heady intoxicant, fueling the fervor with which they sought to claim one another. Their movements, once restrained, now took on a sense of urgency, a frantic edge that bordered on desperation. Lila's hands roamed over the muscular planes of Jordan's back, her nails scoring his skin through the fabric of his shirt, an unspoken plea for more contact, more connection, more of the intoxicating sensation that coursed through her veins like wildfire. In response, Jordan's touch grew bolder, his hands skimming the curves of her body with a reverence that belied his growing need. The thin straps of her dress were no match for his deft fingers, slipping from her shoulders with ease to reveal the lace-clad swell of her breasts. The garment pooled at her feet, a silken puddle that served as a testament to the passion that now ruled their actions. Clothing, once a barrier between them, became superfluous, an inconvenience that was shed with an urgency that left no room for modesty or hesitation. Each discarded item marked a milestone on their journey towards complete and total abandon, a trail of breadcrumbs leading to the heart of Lila's bedroom. There, on the soft expanse of her bed, they came together with a hunger that bordered on frenzy. The boundaries of their relationship, which had once seemed so immutable, so insurmountable, now dissolved under the onslaught of their shared desire. The labels of stepmother and stepson were rendered meaningless by the sheer force of their need for one another, a need that transcended societal norms and familial ties. Lila's body arched beneath Jordan's touch, her skin alive with sensation, each nerve ending attuned to the feel of his hands upon her. She reveled in the weight of him, the solidness of his form pressing her into the mattress, a tangible reminder that this was no mere fantasy. It was reality, albeit a reality that was fraught with consequences they had yet to fully consider. Jordan, for his part, seemed equally captivated by the woman who lay before him. His eyes, dark with desire, roamed over her with an almost awestruck expression, as if he could not quite believe that she was real, that she was here with him, offering herself up to him with an abandon that matched his own. Their connection was a living, breathing entity, a fusion of bodies and souls that defied explanation. Each kiss, each caress, was a revelation, an exploration of the uncharted territories of their relationship. The air was thick with the scent of their passion, a musky perfume that mingled with the faint aroma of gin and the lingering remnants of their colognes. As they moved together, their bodies finding a rhythm that was as old as time itself, Lila was acutely aware of the significance of the moment. This was no mere tryst, no casual indulgence in the throes of passion. It was a turning point, a crossing of the Rubicon from which there could be no turning back. The world outside the sanctuary of Lila's bedroom ceased to exist, its concerns and complications rendered irrelevant by the intensity of their connection. There was only Jordan, his body joined with hers in a dance as old as humanity itself, a dance that celebrated the beauty and power of human desire in its purest, most unadulterated form. The fervor of their coupling had reached a fever pitch, each moment a crescendo of passion that demanded to be memorialized. Lila, in a move that was both bold and characteristic of her nature, extricated herself from Jordan's embrace, her skin flushed with the heat of their lovemaking. With a sultry smile that promised a return to their intimate dance, she reached towards the bedside table, her fingers closing around the sleek form of her camera. Jordan watched her through heavy-lidded eyes, his breath still coming in short, sharp bursts as he took in the sight of her, naked, unashamed, and utterly captivating. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice a low rasp that betrayed his lingering desire. Lila's eyes gleamed with mischief as she met his gaze. "I want to capture this," she said, her tone matter-of-fact, even as a blush crept across her cheeks, highlighting the stark contrast between her bold actions and the vulnerability that lay beneath. "I want to remember us like this, untamed, unrestrained, and utterly consumed by each other." With practiced ease, She positioned the camera on its tripod, angling it to ensure that the lens captured not only their tangled forms, but also the raw, unfiltered emotion that suffused the room. The camera's focus adjusted, the lens zooming in on the interplay of shadows and light that danced across their bodies, a visual symphony that mirrored the tumult of their passion. As the recording began, Lila returned to Jordan's side, her body pressing against his with a familiarity that spoke of hours spent exploring the contours of each other's forms. The presence of the camera did nothing to dampen their ardor. If anything, it served to amplify their desire, adding an extra layer of excitement to their already charged encounter. Their movements resumed, a sensual ballet that was both tender and demanding. The camera captured every gasp, every moan, every moment of exquisite pleasure that played across their faces. It recorded the rhythm of their bodies, the subtle shifts in their expressions, and the unspoken communication that passed between them as they navigated the intricate dance of their lovemaking. As they climbed higher, driven by a need that bordered on desperation, Lila found herself lost in the depths of Jordan's gaze, her world narrowing to the man who held her in his thrall. The camera, a silent witness to their union, continued to roll, its unblinking eye capturing the moment when their control finally shattered, sending them tumbling into the abyss of ecstasy. The sound of their ragged breathing filled the room, the only accompaniment to the visual testament of their chemistry. The camera's lens, slick with the mist of their exertions, remained focused on them even as their bodies went limp, sated, and spent from the force of their climax. In the aftermath, as they lay entangled in the sweat-soaked sheets, Lila reached out to switch off the camera. The red recording light flickered and died, leaving them in the soft glow of the room's dimmed lighting. With the press of a button, she had immortalized the most intimate moment of her life, a decision that would forever alter the landscape of their relationship. Jordan turned to her, his expression a mixture of awe and trepidation. "Lila, what have we done?" he murmured, his hand coming up to brush a stray lock of hair from her forehead. Lila's response was a soft kiss, a gentle affirmation of the choice they had made. "We've lived," she said simply, her voice barely above a whisper. "We've allowed ourselves to feel something real, something powerful, and I, for one, don't regret it." As the night deepened and their breathing evened out, they succumbed to the pull of sleep, their bodies still intimately connected. The camera, now dormant, stood sentinel in the corner of the room, a repository of their shared secrets and the silent testament to a love that defied conventions. The morning light, with its unforgiving clarity, seeped into the bedroom, casting a stark glow over the rumpled sheets and the sleeping form of Jordan. Lila stirred, her body alive with the aches and pains of their passionate lovemaking, each twinge a vivid reminder of the boundaries they had crossed in the heat of the night. As she gently extricated herself from Jordan's embrace, her movements were deliberate and measured, a silent ballet designed to preserve the sanctity of his slumber. Stealing one last glance at the man who had become both her greatest joy and her most profound source of turmoil, Lila slipped from the room, her mind a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. The cool marble of the penthouse floor was a balm against her bare feet as she made her way to her home office, the sight of her camera and the digital evidence of their shared transgressions. With a sense of resolve that belied the trembling of her hands, Lila powered on the camera and queued up the footage from the previous night. The screen flickered to life, revealing the intimate tableau that had unfolded within these very walls. The sight of their entwined bodies, the sound of their mingled cries of passion, filled the room, a potent reminder of the depths of their desire for one another. Lila knew that the existence of these recordings posed a significant risk, one that could potentially unravel the fragile tapestry of lies and half-truths they had woven around their relationship. With a heavy heart, she selected the files and hit delete, watching as the digital traces of their lovemaking disappeared from the screen, one by one, until nothing remained but the sterile emptiness of the camera's memory card. Having erased all evidence of their night together, Lila retreated to the relative safety of the kitchen. The familiar ritual of preparing coffee provided a much-needed distraction from the whirlwind of thoughts that clamored for attention within her mind. The rich, dark beans, ground to perfection and expertly tamped into the espresso machine's filter, were a testament to her dedication to craft and routine, a small yet significant anchor in the choppy waters of her emotional upheaval. The scent of brewing coffee, robust and comforting, soon filled the penthouse, its aromatic tendrils winding their way through the hallways and into the bedroom where Jordan still lay asleep. It was this scent, as much a part of their morning routine as the sunrise itself, that eventually drew him from the warmth of the bed and down the stairs to the kitchen. As Jordan entered the room, his hair tousled from sleep and his body clad in the previous night's discarded clothing, Lila's breath caught in her throat. The sight of him, undeniably handsome, undeniably hers, if only in the secret recesses of her heart, sent a jolt of longing coursing through her veins. Their eyes met across the island, a silent exchange that spoke volumes more than words ever could. In the depths of Jordan's gaze, Lila saw the acknowledgement of the shift in their relationship, a tacit recognition of the new landscape they now navigated together. The air between them was charged with a potent mixture of desire, trepidation, and an overwhelming sense of connection that both thrilled and unnerved her. The espresso machine hissed and gurgled, its mechanical symphony a stark contrast to the quiet that had settled over them. Lila turned away, focusing her attention on the task at hand, her fingers deftly preparing 2 cappuccinos with the precision of long practice. The milk, frothed to perfection, formed a creamy cap atop the dark espresso, a visual representation of the dichotomy that existed within their relationship, dark and light, comfort and danger, all swirling together in an intoxicating blend. She slid one of the cups across the island towards Jordan, her movements deliberate and controlled, a stark contrast to the chaos that raged within her. "Good morning," she said, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. Jordan, his eyes never leaving hers, reached for the cup, his fingers brushing against hers in the process. The contact, fleeting as it was, sent a shiver of awareness coursing through Lila's body, a visceral reminder of the passion they had shared just hours earlier. "Morning," he replied, his voice a low rumble that seemed to resonate within the confines of the kitchen. He took a sip of his coffee, his gaze lowered to the cup in his hands, a silent admission of the tension that now existed between them. They stood there for a moment, separated by the granite expanse of the kitchen island, each lost in their own thoughts as they grappled with the implications of their actions. The morning light, once a symbol of hope and new beginnings, now cast long shadows over their shared existence, hinting at the complexities that lay ahead. As they sipped their coffee in a silence that was both comfortable and fraught with unspoken thoughts, Lila knew that the time for avoidance had passed. The events of the previous night had irrevocably altered the fabric of their relationship, and it was incumbent upon them both to confront the reality of their situation head-on. "We need to talk," she began, setting her coffee cup down on the counter with a decisive clink. "What happened between us last night? It changes everything, Jordan. We can't pretend that it was just a one-time thing, that it didn't mean anything." Jordan looked up at her words, his expression a mixture of apprehension and determination. "I know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I don't want to pretend either. I meant what I said last night, Lila. I'm in this, all the way. But we need to figure out what comes next. We need a plan." Lila nodded, grateful for his candor even as her mind raced with the enormity of the task that lay before them. "We need to be careful," she said, her tone measured and earnest. "We have to protect ourselves and our family. We can't let our relationship destroy everything we've worked so hard to build." They spoke for hours, the conversation meandering through a labyrinth of hypotheticals and potential scenarios. They discussed the logistics of maintaining their relationship in secret, the importance of establishing clear boundaries to prevent unnecessary risks, and the need for absolute discretion in all aspects of their affair. As the day wore on, a sense of cautious optimism took root within Lila's heart. Despite the challenges that awaited them, She was comforted by the knowledge that she and Jordan were united in their determination to navigate the complexities of their relationship with honesty and integrity. By the time the sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow over the city below, they had reached a tentative agreement on how to move forward. The details of their arrangement were far from perfect, but they represented a shared commitment to exploring the depths of their connection without sacrificing the stability and security of their family unit. As they stood on the balcony, watching the sky transform from azure to a tapestry of fiery hues, Lila knew that she was irrevocably bound to Jordan, their fates intertwined by the threads of a love that defied societal norms and family expectations. The road ahead would be fraught with obstacles and potential pitfalls, but as she reached for Jordan's hand, their fingers intertwining with a familiarity that spoke of countless shared moments, she was filled with a sense of hope for the future. Together, they would face whatever came their way, their love a beacon that illuminated the darkness and guided them through the uncharted waters that lay ahead. The penthouse, once a symbol of wealth and privilege, had become a sanctuary for their love, a secret haven where they could revel in the beauty of their shared connection, away from the prying eyes and judgmental whispers of the outside world. And as night fell and the city's lights began to twinkle like distant stars, Lila and Jordan retreated to the comfort of their home, secure in the knowledge that their love, though unconventional, was a force to be reckoned with, a testament to the transformative power of passion and the enduring strength of the human heart.